All right, jumping right in. Today, a topic that sparked debate for, well, forever, abortion. And we're going deep with some pretty powerful source material,
Mm.
the Bible. We're going to see what those scriptures say about this complex issue, right? I mean, it's caused so many different interpretations over time.
Oh, absolutely. It's one of those topics that, it really gets people thinking and feeling strongly,
Yeah.
And as we kind of wade into this sensitive area, I think the key is to remember our goal here isn't to pick a side. We're just trying to shed some light on all the different viewpoints we see in the Bible.
Exactly. No endorsements here, just trying to get those perspectives out there. So let's just dive right in. One verse really jumped out at me, Jeremiah 23.14. It puts killing right next to some serious stuff like adultery, stealing,
Yeah.
saying they all make blood touch blood, which,
Mhm.
wow, that sounds pretty intense. What's your take on this verse, when we're talking about abortion?
That's a great place to start. It's important to remember this verse. It's not just some random statement, right? It's part of this big prophetic message, a really strong condemnation of all the injustice and violence that was happening back then.
So it's more about the big picture of society rather than just like one act of killing.
Exactly. And if we want to go deeper, we got to look at the actual Hebrew word for killing there. It could also mean murder, suggesting a deliberate, unjust taking of a life. And that's a really important difference because, well, it makes us ask, how does the Bible see different kinds of killing? Which is like the whole core of the abortion debate,
Oh,
right?
yeah, I see where you're going with that. And this idea of like different types of killing, it pops up again in Exodus 22.13. This one is about an unborn child being hurt. And it really makes you think about like intention and consequences.
Exactly. And that's where things get tricky with translations. Those ancient Hebrew words, they don't always have a perfect match in English today. So
Yeah.
you got to understand all those subtle meanings in the original language to interpret these verses fairly.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. So we're not just reading words, we're trying to like travel back in time and get the original meaning, right?
Exactly. It's like detective work, putting together all these clues from the language, from history, from culture, trying to see the whole picture.
Okay, I like that, the detective work. Now, switching gears a bit, there are verses like Isaiah 49.5 and Psalm 139.1316. They talk about God actually creating a person in the womb.
Yeah.
These always seem to come up in the whole when does life begin debate. How do you see that connection?
Yeah, you're right. Those passages are often used by people who believe life begins at conception. They really highlight how God is involved in making a human, even from the very, very beginning.
But could there be other ways to read these verses,
Mm,
especially considering the poetic language, the historical context like we talked about before?
definitely. Some scholars say these passages are really about God's power, his presence throughout someone's entire life, not necessarily about one specific moment when life starts. They point to the poetic symbolic language. They say we should look at the bigger theological message.
So even within the Bible, there's room for different interpretations, which honestly kind of reflects the ongoing debate in society, doesn't it?
Absolutely. And that just makes it even more interesting to explore, right? The Bible doesn't give us easy black and white answers. Um, it's like a tapestry, all these different perspectives woven together. And it makes us wrestle with these really complicated questions.
Yeah, it definitely gives you a lot to think about.
It really does. And we've only just scratched the surface here.
That's for sure. So much more to uncover.
Welcome back. Ready to dig into some more of these verses?
Definitely. Going through all this, I'm seeing this theme, like actions and consequences, almost like a ripple effect.
Yeah, you see that a lot in the Bible, that connectedness, especially when we're talking about life and death.
Right, like Hosea 4.2.
Mm-hmm.
It talks about adultery and prostitution, but also like breaking God's laws, almost like it's linking those things to, I don't know, society falling apart.
It is interesting how Hosea ties those together, right? He's talking to the Israelites about being unfaithful to God, but he uses those examples, those moral wrongs, to show what happens when you stray from divine principles.
So it's not just about judging those specific actions,
Yeah.
but understanding the bigger picture,
Yeah.
like how our choices affected everyone, the whole community.
Exactly. The Bible reminds us over and over, we're all connected. What we do, good or bad, it has an impact. It makes you think, how do our choices contribute to a culture that values life or devalues it?
Wow, that's a lot to think about.
Yeah.
Especially when we talk about abortion. It's like it challenges us to go beyond our own personal beliefs and think about the impact on society as a whole.
That's it, exactly. It leads us to another verse, Jeremiah 5.7. It talks about people abandoning God, following false idols, even though they're blessed. It's almost like this sense of not being grateful, ignoring the source of life itself.
That goes back to what we talked about before, recognizing where life comes from.
Yeah.
If we don't acknowledge that or appreciate it, maybe it's easier to, I don't know, dismiss the value of life in others, even the unborn.
You got it. Gratitude, that's a huge theme in the Bible. Recognizing God as the creator, recognizing that he sustains life, it makes you respect all living things.
Right, like if you really get that life is a gift, then you're going to treasure it, protect it, your own life and everyone else's.
Exactly. And that brings us back to this whole question of abortion. If we believe all life is sacred, a gift from God, what does that say about the unborn? When does that sanctity become undeniable?
Those are tough questions. Like we've seen, the Bible doesn't give us easy answers,
Hmm.
but it definitely makes you think, wrestle with these things.
It really does. And to wrestle with that some more, let's look at this verse. Might seem kind of surprising here. Proverbs 16.32. It says it's glorious to overlook a transgression. How do you think that idea of forgiveness could apply to all the strong feelings around abortion for people who've had abortions and people who are against it?
That's a good point. Forgiveness, I mean, that's at the heart of Christianity, right?
Yeah.
It recognizes that we all make mistakes, and holding on to anger, judgment, that can be really harmful.
It can. It can stop us from having real conversations, finding common ground.
So could forgiveness be a way to, like, heal and reconcile in this whole debate about abortion? Bridge the gap between people with different views?
It's worth thinking about, definitely. If we can come to this issue with empathy, really wanting to understand each other,
Mm,
maybe then we can have more compassionate conversations, even if we don't agree on everything.
I like that a lot. And, kind of shifting gears a bit, another verse that stuck out to me was Proverbs 19.11. It says, it's wise to overlook an offense. Makes me think about really listening to the other side, not judging right away.
Absolutely. That ability to really listen, to try to understand where someone's coming from, that's so important, especially with something as emotional as abortion.
It's so easy to get caught up in what we believe and just dismiss anything different. This verse, it's a good reminder that being wise means trying to understand, considering different viewpoints, even if we don't end up agreeing.
Yeah, and that's what we're trying to do here, right? We're not here to tell you what to think or give you all the answers. We just want to encourage you to think deeply, have open conversations. Looking at all these different perspectives in the Bible, hopefully it gives you a way to talk about these things, even when they're really tough.
Definitely. As we keep going here, another theme that keeps popping up for me is personal responsibility.
Oh, yeah. The Bible's big on that, individual accountability. It's like we're not just sitting back waiting for God's grace. We're actively involved in shaping our lives and the world around us.
Like in Ephesians 4.13, it talks about living a life worthy of our calling, being humble, gentle, patient, loving each other even when it's hard.
Powerful words, right? Those are the qualities we need for good relationships, for building a society where life is valued, protected.
So it's like these verses are telling us to approach tough topics like abortion with humility, trying to understand, recognizing that we're all human even when we disagree.
Exactly. And that takes us right into our last segment. When we come back, we'll see how these ideas, personal responsibility, forgiveness, understanding, how they can help us think about the ethics of abortion, in a way that's more constructive, more compassionate.
Welcome back to the deep dive. Feels like we've really gone deep,
Yeah.
into how the Bible sees abortion.
We have. It's been quite a journey. All those verses, the history, trying to understand what they meant originally, and then the bigger questions about ethics and society.
And I feel like there's still so much to think about.
Oh, absolutely. But as we wrap up, I think it's good to remember those big themes we talked about.
Yeah, they really help tie everything together. We talked about the history behind the verses, how everything's connected, the actions and consequences, and then gratitude, forgiveness, and taking responsibility for ourselves in this really tough issue.
And through it all, one thing that keeps coming up is that reverence for life. It doesn't matter how you interpret the verses, whether you think life begins at conception or some other time, the Bible is clear. Human life is sacred. We need to protect those who are vulnerable.
Yeah, I think we can all agree on that. But the real challenge for all of us as individuals, as a society, is what does that actually look like? How do we take these ideas from the Bible and actually live them out? How do we help women and at the same time uphold the sanctity of life?
That's the big question, isn't it? It takes real thought, open minds, and being able to talk to each other, even when we disagree. It's not about forcing our beliefs on others. It's about finding common ground, finding solutions that are compassionate and just.
As we're talking, it makes me wonder, maybe the Bible isn't trying to give us a rule book about abortion. Maybe it's more like giving us a framework, a way to think about making ethical decisions, like a compass to help us when things are morally complicated.
That's a really insightful way to put it. The Bible, it gives us principles, stories, wisdom that can help us make decisions. But it also wants us to think critically, to wrestle with the tough questions, to keep searching for understanding, even when things aren't clear-cut.
So maybe the point isn't finding one perfect answer in the Bible. Maybe it's about letting those scriptures guide us, inform our conscience, help us make choices that line up with, well, with how we understand God's will and our own values.
Beautifully said. In the end, this is something deeply personal, but it affects everyone. And we need to approach it with humility, with empathy, with that commitment to truth, even when it's hard.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Well, looks like we've reached the end of our deep dive. We've covered so much, but hopefully you're leaving with more questions than answers, more curiosity than certainty, because that's what makes these topics so interesting, so worth exploring. Thanks for joining us on the deep dive, and until next time, keep searching, keep questioning, keep the conversation going.